Module 3 of Chapter 14 is on so-called barrier options. In barrier options, a payoff depends on whether the stock price achieves a certain level, which is called the barrier level, during its life. And therefore, the value of this option is again path dependent. That if we have a 1-year barrier option and it's a call, and we know at expiry that the price is above the strike price, we still have to know the path of prices along the way. Because if that path of prices hits the barrier, that'll affect whether a payoff is made or not. There are several types of barrier options. Of course, there's puts and calls. And they're typically categorized, first of all, as what's called knockout options. This is an option which, at the moment you buy it, provides a payoff. However, if the stock price hits the barrier, something will happen. So what we have is a down and out, and that would be a situation where you buy an option, and let's say here's the option, these are called knockout. There's the stock price, here's the barrier. So you buy the option when the stock price is S and it's above the barrier. And what a down and out says is if that before expiry, if that stock price hits the barrier, the option goes out of existence. It gets canceled. So it's alive at time 0, and if that stock price stays above B, you get a payoff just like a normal put or call. An up and out works oppositely, namely stock price starts below the barrier, and as long as that stock price stays below the barrier, you'll get a payoff just like a vanilla option. However, it's called up and out. If the stock price hits the barrier before expiry, the option is canceled. We also have knock-in options where rather than the occurrence of hitting the barrier canceling the option, the occurrence of the stock price hitting the barrier turns the option on, like a switch. So one can think of the barrier as creating a switch in the option. In a knockout option, hitting the barrier turns the switch off, the option is expired. And with a knock-in option, this is an option where, here's the barrier. The option is initially dead. It's not alive. And that it is only alive if, in fact, the stock price hits the barrier. So if that stock price gets to expiry without ever hitting the barrier, it's a dead option, no payoff. However, if the stock price hits the barrier, turns the switch on, the option is now alive, and there will be a payoff at expiry. So there can be a down and in, that's this one here. It has to go down, and when it hits the barrier, the option goes into effect, switch goes on. You can have an up and in, where the stock price is initially below the barrier, the option's dead. However, if the stock price hits the barrier, up and in, the stock price becomes, the option becomes alive. There's also a kind of barrier option called a rebate option. And this is an option where a fixed payment is made. So a down rebate is where you get a payoff if the price falls to the barrier. So if it hits the barrier by falling to it, a fixed payment is made. Whereas an up rebate is where the stock is initially below the barrier and a payoff is made if the stock hits the barrier from below. Barrier options are less valuable than vanilla options. And the reason is that there's a type of parity equation that a knock-in plus a knockout is equal to a vanilla. So let's look at some examples. If I have a down and input and I add that to a down and output, I get a vanilla put. We'll see this illustration in a minute. So therefore, since all three put prices have to be positive, it's clear that these two, the down and in and the down and out, they both have to be cheaper than the vanilla put. We have the same with the up options. If we look at the up and in versus the up and out, it's going to be a vanilla call. So let's do an example. Imagine that the stock price is 100, strike is 100, and we have a barrier of 110. It's a one-year option. So what's an up and in call? It says that the stock price has to go up to 110, and then there will be a payoff at expiry. So the up and in call pays the typical call formula, but only if the stock price exceeds 110 sometime before expiry. What's an up and out call? An up and out call says you'll pay this dollar amount, but only if the stock price never hits the barrier, stays below it. Well, it's clear that these two events, that the stock price is 110 or more sometime during the period, or never hits 110, these two are complete and exhaustive events. The stock price has to do one or the other. And therefore, when I add these two together, I get a vanilla put. I get the payoff of S minus, I said put, this is a call. I get a vanilla call, namely, I get a payoff of S minus 100 no matter what the stock price does along the way. Okay, so this is an important idea, and because these knockout, these barrier options are cheaper, they serve to offer investors and speculators less expensive ways of hedging certain positions. And